right, and we're rolling. Today we are talking about coffee. This fantastic drink that everybody loves. It's so awesome and so good for you, right? Yes, but there's always some but, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, coffee, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's talk about all the things that are good about coffee, not so good, and then really terrible. So what's good about coffee? Coffee is full of antioxidants, so it can be very good for your body. It is a performance enhancer, so it can improve physical endurance, it can improve focus, can improve CNS activation, um, focus when we need to study, to work, to get a project done, that type of stuff. So, and also, let's face it, it's very, very tasty, very yummy, especially when we develop that acquired taste after a little while. Coffee tastes very good. It's very enjoyable. A drink that we can have socially. So there's a lot of good stuff that comes with coffee. The less good stuff. Something that is very extremely addictive. Coffee is extremely addictive, like many strong drugs out there. And a lot of people are going to hear me say that and be like, well, chill out. It's coffee, you find it at the convenience store. You have all these coffee shops, like everybody drinks it. What's the big deal? And that's the problem. That's one of the problems, is that it's very downplayed. But the fact remains that coffee is extremely addictive. Ask anyone who drinks coffee. Most people probably drink it every day. A lot of people have multiple cups a day, and sometimes it's not always because they necessarily need it, although a lot of people do feel like they need it, but a lot of times it's out of habit, and it's a habit that can be really difficult to break. We'll get into that a little bit later, but it is extremely addictive, so very, very hard to get off of if you're trying to break the cycle a little bit. I wrote intolerance. Coffee, just like any other food that you put in your body, your body can develop an intolerance to it because there are components in it that that your body will get used to it a little bit too much and not react to it like it should. So that's also something that happens with food that we eat very often. There's like common food allergens, and then it's important also to distinguish between intolerance and allergy. So we can kind of see that on a scale, if you will, meaning at the very bottom is no reaction at all, a food that you tolerate really well, that you digest very well, doesn't cause any issue. Is assimilated really well by your body, and then when you go up the ladder of intolerance, you start to have mild reaction, and then more and more severe reaction, and then like the ultimate, the top of the pyramid there, or top of the ladder of reaction to food is a full out food allergy, which is like could be life threatening. I don't know that I've heard very many people allergic to coffee, but you can develop significant intolerances with coffee, lower level intolerances, like feeling bloated, feeling foggy headed, believe it or not, because caffeine is supposed to be clearing your mind, right, making you more focused, more awake, but there's quite a few people that will drink coffee and it will make them more sluggish, less focused. So it is a thing. So very careful with that. So if you consume something too often, like every single day, multiple times a day, that's when you're setting yourself up for possible intolerance to develop. It also masks fatigue and how much you really have in the tank. So, for example, I have a hard workout to do today, and I'm not feeling 100%. I don't feel like I have all the energy that I should coming in, or don't feel like I'm not going to get the most out of my workout. So therefore, I'm going to go and have some coffee or any other caffeine beverage of choice. And that might sound like a really good idea, because you might think, oh, that's awesome. You're actually, it allows you to get more out of your workout that you wouldn't really have gone otherwise. But there's a flip side to that, right? So if you flip the coin, and see the other side of it is your it's most likely your body sending you a signal telling you, hey, look, you're tired, you're beat up, you need some rest, you haven't slept enough, or you've done too much recently, or you're too stressed, and this workout would just take an extra toll on the body, because even though there's different types of stressors, which I've talked about in other videos, physical stressors, mental stressors, emotional stressors, in some ways your body differentiates those, but in some other ways the physical reaction that you get to those stressors are similar. So your body doesn't always recognize the difference when there's the stress load that's being applied on the body, and going out there and doing a workout and drinking coffee beforehand that will allow you to do more work than you would have normally been able to do without the coffee, is just potentially going to set you deeper in the hole and either make you even more tired afterward, or make you even more overtrained than you already were before. So it's important in those cases to really listen to your body, and that's why that might not always be the best idea to consume coffee before training. And in some instances it's fine, but we got to be able to balance here between when is it okay to use coffee to enhance performance, and when is it not okay and we need to back off a little bit. Essentially, every time it becomes too much of a habit, it becomes every time, then maybe this is when you should have a little light bulb that goes off in your head and tells you, okay, I have something to address here. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The half-life of caffeine. Not that it's bad in itself, but caffeine stays on average about 9 hours in your system, depending on where you read from. Some sources might say as little as 6 hours, as much as 12 and more. But I think 9 is a generally well accepted number. But in either cases, that's a long time that the caffeine stays active in your body. And think about drinking a cup of coffee before going to the gym at 4 o'clock, for example. Then the caffeine is going to be in there until 1 in the morning. And for most people, I think it's unlikely that you're going to go to bed that late. So it's going to interfere with your ability to fall asleep, but also your sleep quality for the first few hours of the night. So not good, obviously. So it's, as long as it's timed well, it's not an issue. But a lot of people do not know that and don't really time their coffee intake accordingly. I wrote pesticides because coffee is among one of the most sprayed crops in the world, along with wheat, corn, and soy. And some people might think, okay, pesticides, whatever, not a big deal. But whether you think it's a big deal or not, the reality is that we're exposed to pesticides more and more in 2019, more than we ever have, because pesticides are used on many different food crops, but you also have residues in the air, in the water that you drink, and we're very much exposed to it. So in very, very small quantities, maybe it won't cause a whole lot of harm immediately, but in the long term, there's a build-up effect that happens, and that's why it's very important to know that and pay attention to that. So I always recommend going organic, especially for coffee, and that will at least dissipate some of that. Okay. The ugly, mess up sleep. I've talked about how the half-life of coffee is quite long. It stays in your system active for a very long time, and not only on the one time that you drink it, but over time, if you drink coffee every single day, multiple times a day, it's going to mess up your cortisol production, which we'll talk about right after. And your cortisol is your stress hormone, so that can very much interfere with your ability to calm down at night and let your body relax and get into relaxation and sleep mode a little bit later. So it jacks up your hormonal balance, because if cortisol is constantly elevated by coffee consumption, then it also messes up a bunch of other hormones in your body. So there's a lot of like imbalances in your hormonal system that's going to happen if you drink coffee many times a day, every day. So something to be very, very careful with, because once you've jacked up that hormonal system and messed up your cortisol production, your normal cortisol production, of course, because to a certain extent, it's cortisol is normal and you want some in your body, but it should be in certain amounts at certain times of the day, where it should be higher in the morning and drop throughout the day, where at night it's not very much there, and it leaves place for the more the hormones that are more geared towards recovery. Mask overtraining and lack of sleep. So we kind of talked about that already. If somebody constantly drinks coffee before their workout or their training session, because they feel like they don't have the energy to do it, they don't feel like they're gonna get the most out of their workout without it, then a lot of times it's just masking overtraining. Because if you're going to your workouts and you're constantly tired and feel like you're never getting optimal workouts without caffeine, it's most likely there's other stuff going on, but a lot of times it just points right to overtraining, that you're probably just doing too much and training way too hard. And then that's the lack of sleep. Of course, if every day you have your coffee in the morning, mid-morning, lunch, and afternoon, your body is never going to feel that it's that tired, other than when you're getting home and crashing at night. But it gives you a false perception that you have enough energy, when in reality you don't, and you're just kind of masking that with caffeine. And then once again, like it's going back to messing up your hormonal balance, and that can jack up your system in all sorts of different ways. And then it's very hard to get off from, which I've mentioned already. If you've been consuming coffee every single day, multiple cups a day, try to break that cycle is very difficult, because it's extremely addictive. It's very, very addictive, and it's very hard to get out of it. And sometimes the withdrawal symptoms can be quite harsh also. Big headaches, inability to focus, feeling extra tired, and the list goes on. But it can be quite difficult. Okay, so some of the tips I have for you, whether you are addicted to coffee or not, or trying to avoid being addicted to coffee, is fixing your sleep and focusing on sleep first, and only rarely or occasionally that you are using coffee to compensate for the lack of sleep. If you have like one or two bad nights of sleep here and there, and need to be performing the next day, coffee can come in very handy. I have three little ones at home. My oldest is 4 years old, so having good nights of sleep is not always easy. So again, in those times, coffee can come in pretty handy. It can be difficult though with little ones at home, and with little ones who don't really sleep too well, and having coffee at hand is very nice and can become a habit very very easily. And even myself, I really need to check myself constantly with that to make sure I don't fall into that pattern again of just like drinking coffee every day, multiple servings a day, and try to find other strategies to get my rest and my sleep back up. So fixing sleep before trying to get off coffee. If you don't fix your sleep, if you don't get enough rest, make sure you sleep at least 7 to 8 hours a night, even more. Using relaxation techniques, that type of stuff. If you don't do that, if you don't fix your rest and your sleep, it's going to be pretty much impossible to get through your day without really having that strong need for caffeine. Food intolerances. So one of the many symptoms of an intolerance to a certain food is drowsiness and feeling tired and sluggish after you eat that food, usually in the 30 minutes to 2 hour window after you eat. And the list can go on of what it can be, but like the common food intolerances that can cause that type of symptoms: wheat, dairy, corn. Well, most grains really are known for that type of effects. So very important to pay attention to that. Listen to your body after you eat, and really notice when you feel more tired than usual, more sluggish than usual, and so you can kind of address that again, so you don't have to like use caffeine to compensate for the food intolerances that you have, and those foods that you keep eating and then your body's not agreeing with very well. Limit the use with training. So like I said before, I think it's okay every once in a while to have a cup of coffee or have a pre-workout or whatever your go-to is in terms of caffeine, to have that before a workout, as long as you don't make that a habit. Something using it once or twice a week, maybe on the harder workout days, or on the day that like I mentioned earlier, if like the one night you didn't have good sleep, but usually you do, and you're not overtrained, that might be a good use for it. But try to not fall into the pattern of using coffee every single time before training, and for games also. That would apply for games also. And then if you can get to a point where you can go 2-3 days a week with no caffeine at all, I think you're in a pretty good spot. And again, like, you might need to go through those steps and kind of review those steps multiple times before you can get to that end goal. But I think ultimately, if you're able to get there, that's ideal, because you're keeping your tolerance low. And that's something I haven't even mentioned yet, is your body builds up tolerance to caffeine. So the more you drink it, the more you feel like you need more, like just like any other drugs, really. So by drinking it only sparingly, or having days during the week that you don't drink coffee, it'll keep your tolerance on the lower end, and you won't feel like you need a whole lot. You don't need like the big venti to keep you awake. So also, those 2-3 days a week, ideally you would want no coffee at all. So that includes sodas and teas that you would want to stay away from, because those also contain caffeine, even though it's not as much. They still do contain caffeine. It can still affect you, and you might rely on those quite a bit and won't do as good a job at keeping your tolerance low. So if there's like 2 to 3 days a week that you don't have any caffeine at all, and you don't feel like you need it, you're in a pretty good spot. So hopefully video was helpful, a little bit on the longer side today, but hopefully that stuff is helpful. If you like it, give me a like, give me a follow, and comment if you have any questions below, and please share the video.